Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi. Now, a while back the guys over at Retro Blasting did a great restoration on a vintage Imperial troop transporter from Star Wars, but they failed to cover the bit that I thought was probably the most interesting bit of that troop transporter, and that is the voice box bit. Now here in front of me we have the voice box unit that is from an Imperial troop transporter, and today I'm going to take this apart and we're going to see if we can get it working any better than it does currently. Now the way these work is there's a small record inside. You can't really see it because it's sort of hidden in this bit. There's a speaker, a little motor which turns the record, and some buttons that choose one of 6 phrases, and we're going to need a battery here to get everything running. So if I just touch the contacts onto the positive and negative of the batteries, I'll just hold those in place with my fingers. We should be able to press the buttons and it will speak. I think that's supposed to be the sort of the movement noise. R2-D2, where are you? That's the laser fire. There's one set for stun. Again, that's the transporter noise. They should all have 6 different noises. We've got the laser again on that one. And R2 on that one. So it appears that it's not playing quite properly. It's also very noisy and distorted. So if we could take this apart, we should be able to improve that somewhat. Now this same mechanism has been used in lots of different toys, and probably the best example I have is on the vintage Toy Action Man as we have here. Now this one doesn't use batteries. This is just done with springs and all sorts of mechanisms. And if I pull this cord here, you can see it says send out the patrol. Now this has a randomizer on it, so if I do it again, it randomly plays one of 5 different sounds. Now I've already done a video on how to fix this, so I know the principle of how these work, so I reckon taking this apart we should be able to fix this as well. So let's get started. The first thing to do is let's take this apart so we can see what's inside. Now there are 2 screws on the bottom here that hold, I would imagine, the record section. As you can see, there's part of the drive shaft there from the motor. The motor is here, and it looks like the sort of record and playback bits are in there. On the bottom we have the speaker, and there are 2 more screws. So oh no, 3 more screws. There's one in the middle there that holds the spring mechanism for the speaker. So I think first up, let's take the ones off the bottom and we'll see what happens. I have never done this before, so this is new to me as well, but it's always interesting to see how these toys are put together. There's one screw. Another. We'll undo that one, which looks like it has a spring on it, so could all be spring loaded on the inside here. We'll just wait and see. I'm now going to gently lift up this section. As you can see, there's a spring on the bottom. Oh, it looks like actually we didn't need to unscrew that one. I'm going to screw that back in place now so that we don't lose that bit, and keep that all separate. In fact, just checking that out, I don't actually know what that screw is for, because there's no screw hole in the top of this little spring mount here, and there's nothing in the bottom of that there, so I'm not really sure what that spring is for. It does go in, it does tighten up, and it does just sort of push out at the bottom. Well, maybe we'll have to investigate that later on, but it doesn't really look like that does much at the moment. Anyway, so here we have the internal bits of the mechanism. We can see here, this is this speaker. It's a non-powered speaker. It just uses the motion of the needle arm to vibrate this little diaphragm here. That's exactly the same as how the one works on the Action Man. So we should be able to just lift that up because it won't be held in very firmly. And it isn't. So yeah, there you go. That's just the speaker mechanism. You can also see here the needle that runs on the record. This little disc here, that's the record, and then this is the needle that moves up and down. And the way the diaphragm part of this works is, I'm sure if we look here, yes, you can see that there's a little tab. This bit rests on top of the needle, and that's how the sound is transferred into the diaphragm of the speaker. It is a very simple little machine. It's very clever. They could have done this without actually having a battery involved, much like the Action Man did, and just have a pull cord where you pulling the cord wound up a spring. But I'm guessing, as all of the other Star Wars toys involve batteries, they thought it was no big deal to add a battery to it. You can clearly see here, there's the needle, and that's it touching the bottom of the diaphragm of the speaker. Very simple indeed. So let's take the other side apart and we'll see if we can work out how that mechanism works and why the tracks aren't being selected properly. So I'm now going to take the bottom off. It looks like we are missing one screw here from this end. It may be that that inner pole has snapped off that screws into, but it still seems to hold together pretty well. Let's undo these two screws at the bottom here. Now of course there's a lot of springs on this side, so things may unspring as we do this. Again, just best to take it slow and we'll see what happens. So 2 more screws come out. Now they're all the same screws, so that's good. If I gently pull on these, we can see what's going to happen. Oh yeah, okay, I can see there is a rubber band in there on the record player part of it. So now that's everything apart. So now you can clearly see the little record. Now if I tilt this into the light, you might be able to see that there are some grooves going into the record. They're sort of quite pronounced. There's one there, another one there. There's 6 of these grooves, and these are obviously what guide the needle into the correct track. So there'll be 6 tracks on this record, 1 for each sound, and this all turns quite freely. You can also see there's a little rubber band here which was hooked over the motor there, so that needs to be rehooked over, and I can see exactly how that needs to be done. When you put the thing back together, you'll need to push something through this little hole here and then maybe use a pair of tweezers to hook the rubber band over whatever you bring through, like so, like that, and then you can push this all back together and remove the screwdriver and it will hook back onto the drive motor axle there. So it's a fairly straightforward little system. It looks like this is quite dirty. I can see quite a lot of grime within the grooves of the record. It doesn't look particularly scratched, it's just a little bit dirty. So I think I'm going to give this a careful clean. Now getting this apart, I'm just trying to work out if that can actually be done, because the way it's been put together, they've melted a bit of plastic in the middle to hold everything in place. So this all rotates quite freely, but that little bit of metal, that little bit of plastic there has been melted. So you're never going to be able to remove that without damaging the plastic. So I think I'm going to have to clean this all in situ. There is a spring as well. Let's see if we can see where the spring is in there. Oh yes, here's the little spring mechanism. So that moves this section back and forward. Now this is moved every time you press the button. If I press one of these buttons, the way this works is it pushes, but it's got a little, when you push the peg it pushes this little bit round using the angle, and I'm guessing that pushes this arm up, which then moves the diaphragm so that it chooses each track. So it is a fairly simple little design. It's just, I'm going to say, dirty. I think if we clean this, then it should come up quite nicely. So I'm just going to have a quick look and see what the best way is to clean a record like this. I would guess some cotton buds and maybe a little bit of lighter fluid or something should remove the grime, and we can then try getting this back together and see if it works. Chatting to some other people that I know restore toys, they've suggested that maybe putting a thin bit of PVA glue on it and letting that dry and then removing that is a good way of getting any dirt and grime out of the record grooves. But to me that sounds like a bit of a risk, because you really do risk damaging the record. So I'm going to use my favourite cleaning method, which is lighter fluid, and I have here a cotton bud, and I'm just gently going to squirt lighter fluid onto the cotton bud, and I'm going to very carefully work my way around the record and just gently brush off any dirt, because lighter fluid is very good at dissolving sort of greasy, dirty sort of stains and stuff. And I'm going to do this very gently and very carefully, and then I'm going to wipe it down with a clean cotton bud, and I'll do this a few times, and I'm hoping that this will clear out any sort of dirt and grime left on it. You can actually see a little bit of dirt on the end of there, so it is working. I just have to gently hold the record to stop it from rotating. And lighter fluid does also evaporate fairly quickly, so you're not left with any sort of sticky residue anywhere. While I have this motor apart as it is, I'm also going to clean around all of these buttons. There's quite a lot of dirt and grime where the little spring sort of joins onto the plastic. I don't want to take the springs off, there seems no need to remove those, so just again a bit of lighter fluid and a cotton bud, and I can easily wipe away all the grime and stuff that's around each one of these. You can see how much dirt there is on them. That looks a lot cleaner already. I'm also going to take the opportunity to clean the needle as well. The needle is actually made out of metal, so again just a bit of lighter fluid on a cotton bud. If I turn this over, you can see the needle here. I'll just give that a quick clean just to remove any sort of bits of dust or fluff or anything that have caught on that over the years. Now if the motor's not working on yours, this is an ideal time to give it a little spin. Often with these motors they just seize up from not being used over the years, so just give it a little spin. Again, we can put the battery on. We should be able to get that running just on its own. There you go, you can hear that just runs like it does. So if yours isn't working, then just give it a spin. If it's broken, this is a fairly common size motor. I would have thought you'd be able to pick this up. It looks fairly similar to the ones used in the Falcon, so I would have thought you'd be able to pick up something quite similar to fit and replace that. It just needs to have a rough little shaft there on the main part of the motor, because that's what grips the rubber band. I've now got everything as clean as I think it can be got, and I've also worked out what this little spring is for here. It seemed obvious once I'd worked it out, but it took me a little while. Basically, as the needle moves across the record, it comes towards this little bit of metal and then gently pushes the metal away from this contact, breaks the circuit and stops the motor. So it is just a simple switch. I don't know why it didn't sort of occur to me earlier that that's what that was, but I just hadn't really been thinking about it properly. So it's a simple little switch. So we can now go ahead and put this back together and see if we've made any difference to the playback. First thing we've got to do is to get this rubber band that goes around the record in a position that it will go back onto the axle of the motor. Now this is a little bit fiddly, but there is an access hole, as you can see here, and we can use that to our advantage. So what I'm going to do is I have a screwdriver. I'm just going to push that through the access hole a little way, and I'm going to get a pair of tweezers and I'm going to grab the elastic, and then I'm going to push my screwdriver up. It'd be much easier to do without the camera in the way. Let's do this again, like so, and I just hook it over the screwdriver so that it's held away from the record. Now we can very carefully put the top section back on, lining everything up so that it all lines up neatly. And if you look through the hole, you can see there, you can see the axle and you can see my screwdriver. So all we've got to do is, as we push this together, make sure that the rubber band is going over the axle, and as we let go we can then pull out the screwdriver, and you can see just through there that the band is now over the axle of the motor. So it's a little bit of a fiddly job, but it isn't too complicated to do. And I can now put a couple of screws in to hold this bottom section on before we put the top on. Now while I'm doing this, you can see I'm actually holding the motor in place. The motor wants to fall out of the way, and obviously if it does fall out of the way, we've got to do that whole process again. So just make sure that you hold that so that it doesn't fall away from the rubber band. We can just quickly screw this back together like so. There is a screw missing here, and actually the bit of plastic that holds it in place is snapped off, but it doesn't seem to make much difference, so I'm going to leave that as is. So we now put that up the other way, and again take the little diaphragm speaker that has to slot on. There were two pegs either side of the motor. The wires are neatly held in place, so we can just slot that over like so, and then we can drop this on. And again, this is the little spring bit that needs to go right in the center of the speaker, and then we drop that over like so, and it just clips in place, and then we'll just screw that back on, and we can test and see if it works, and see if it's made any difference to the playback sort of randomness and noise and dirt that was on the record. It's now all back together, and I have the battery contacts held onto the battery, and we'll see how this works. I have a feeling it won't have made a great deal of difference to the quality, because the records on these things really aren't meant to last, and they were already quite noisy at the start. But we can see, so let's press these buttons and see what happens. That's not bad. So it does work. It's no better, I would say, than it was when I originally took it apart, but I have a feeling that really is the best it's going to ever get. It's always going to be a bit noisy and a bit dirty. The random nature of these buttons is something that I think you get used to. Originally, when you would have had it, it probably would have played, but still a little bit randomly. I think the way this mechanism is designed, it's always going to be a little bit sort of flaky. But as you can see, it's not the most complicated of things. People are always a little bit scared of taking things like this apart, but really, when you do take them apart, there's not a great deal in them, and it's very easy to work out what goes on. And you would have been quite easy to swap the rubber band out if that had snapped, or swap the motor out. So don't ever be frightened of taking these things apart. So as you can see, it's pretty much back where we started, but it does work, and it's been quite an interesting thing to tear down and put back together. Not the sort of thing I would have done normally, but pretty interesting. So I hope this video has been of interest to you, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter and Facebook.